Dram watering tools have been the professional's choice for quality and durability for 80 years. Use a Dram rain wand to create the softest shower of rain for your beds and containers, a 9-pattern revolver spray gun for a variety of uses, or a Colour Storm sprinkler for a lush green lawn and garden. Dram, the professional's choice for lawn and garden. Available at a fine garden centre near you. Visit us online at dramm.com.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hey everybody, I'm Danielle. I'm the executive editor here at FG. And Carol, it's like our second. Usually we only do one annual Q&A episode, but I will say we give the people what they want, and they wanted another Q&A episode. So we are doing Q&A with our listeners today, and I'm pretty excited. I have to say, we were just talking about it though. It kind of felt like I was back in college doing like research papers last night for some of these questions.
Me too. And, I guess that's what we do, right? We do research. We learn about new things all the time. But
it's true.
It's nice to get out of the mold and do something different once in a while, though. I liked it. It's kind of fun.
It was. It took us out of our comfort zone a bit. And I will say, man, thank you guys via email, via social media. We now have a 2-sheet spreadsheet in Excel with all of your questions. So without further ado, we're going to hop right in and see how many of these we can get to in this segment. But thank you. And keep it coming. If you guys have any sort of questions that you would like, we're going to continue doing these Q&A episodes periodically through the year. You can reach us at fg@taunton, and that's TAUNTON.com, or reach out to us on Instagram, reach out to us on Facebook at, the Fine Gardening Instagram page or the Facebook Instagram page. We'll get to you. We'll get there. We'll add you to the spreadsheet, as they say. All right, Carol, who did you pick out of the spreadsheet first?
I picked one that was a question I was curious about. So this is from @momathome. Okay. And they asked, does the Miyawaki method for establishing a forest work? And I thought, okay, that's an interesting question. And how would you define work? But what I learned is that the Miyawaki method is not really a gardening technique as much as it is like an extensively researched approach to reforestation and ecological engineering. And so there's a lot of science behind it. And there are thousands of sites all over the world where this has been tried and is proving to be very effective. So Akira Miyawaki was a Japanese botanist. He began college at the end of World War II. You can imagine this in Japan. And he went to the graduate school at Hiroshima University. And he started in 1949, which, if people know their history, that's like 4 years after the bomb was dropped over Hiroshima. So his interest was in weeds, things that grew back naturally in these devastated war-torn sites. And he wanted to figure out a way to bring their natural forests back because they were very deforested after this happened and, in general from the war.
Yeah.
So his basic premise is that a degraded site that has no trees and the soil has been depleted can be intensively planted with a carefully engineered mix of native plants. So he would put a mix of trees, shrubs, ground covering, herbs, perennials, and very close together, as close as like 2-3 feet together. And these plants would grow and form a community that's sort of competitive, it's dynamic, Not everything survived, but because the plants were so close together, they grew much more quickly than they would if they were sort of naturally reseeding themselves from birds. And, the other thing to compare it to is how the timber industry reforests, which is really focused on a few species that are valuable for timber, but
monocultures basically.
Right, and spaced so that they would grow pretty wood that you could cut down in, a certain number of years. This is not about that. This is about bringing a functional forest onto a site where nothing exists. So the very important first step is to get the soil to a place where it can support this kind of life. So the Miyawaki method always includes a big survey, a very intensive survey of the soil. You restore the soil. They said that, you want the topsoil depth to be 7 to 20 inches, depending on what you're growing. And then you plant, and you need to take care of the plants and make sure there are no invasive non-native species. And you tend it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then it takes care of itself. And they're finding, and this is happening in Asia, US, Europe, all over the world. In tropical areas and temperate areas, they're seeing a functional forest regrowing within 20 to 30 years, where if nature took its course, it would take 200 or 300 years to accomplish the same amount of diversity. Yeah, so it does work, and it works wherever you are, as long as you put all of this, intensive research into it. And I just, it's fascinating, right? This is not gardening, but it is gardening adjacent. I feel like gardeners could learn something from this. Like maybe 100%. You can plant things a little closer together if you want fast filling, if you want a taller canopy earlier, make things compete with each other. So fascinating stuff. I found a really good article put out by the University of Pennsylvania's Extension Service, and I will drop a link into the show notes for that, because they also have links that, if you really want to get into the science, they've got links to the research and fascinating stuff. And I just love to get a question about something that's new to me, but that's this interesting. Very cool.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, Carol, I think it is gardening adjacent. The other thing I think is that, yes, there's aspects now of gardening. Matrix gardening has taken off pretty considerably the last few years. Naturalistic gardening kind of is adjacent to that as well, where you are creating this intensive planting that you're planting closer together. You've got 3 to 4 different layers of plants in some matrices. In what Adam Woodruff, the designer who was out in the Midwest and now is on the East Coast, does, you have sometimes 7 different layers of plants, and you are intensively planting a space for fast filling ecological purposes. You're really trying to mimic what you naturally see in meadows, in forests, in, shade, woodland, stream bed areas, whatever the case may be of your situation. So, that's very cool. And the fact that it seems like a lot of that now, what's old is new, right? Might have come from original sparked in ideas from that. Wow, that's so fascinating. All right, we're good. We can end the episode now. Thank you for that question, and thank you for that awesome answer, Carol. Okay, so my first question was from Danielle. I swear I did not pick this question because she has my name, but it was via email, and it came in, and Danielle wanted to know, out of the ordinary hummingbird nectar plants, and that pulled on my heartstrings because it is hummingbird season here in the Northeast. I've been watching them just duke it out in my garden and get all curious and zoom around my head while we're eating dinner at night on the patio. So I picked 2, and the first one is Cardinal Climber, and that's Ipomea solterii, and it's a hybrid. It's a cross. It's between 2 different vines. It gets a very, very confusing Latin history. You'll see it all over the place. named differently on the internet, but this was a hand-pollinated hybrid between red morning glory, which is Ipomea coquina, and cypress vine, which is Ipomea quamclit. Quamclit. I think I got that right. So it can vine up to 10 feet. It's an annual, so don't worry. This isn't something that's going to pull the siding off of your house or anything like that. You start the seeds indoors in the spring and you soak them overnight. Like most of the Morning Glory family, they need a little help. You can also take a little nail file and nick them a bit and then soak them. I find in my past with Morning Glories, that tends to help the effort of germination along a little bit even more. Then you can move these outside after the threat of frost is over. Obviously, getting up to 10 feet in a single season, it's going to need some sort of structure, a trellis, some sort of, tutor, something along those lines. This is not an aggressive vine, though. Like, I want to be very specific. This is not, a climbing hydrangea or something along those lines. It's just this very delicate climber with these really deeply cut, almost fern-like leaves, but it is not mimosa-like, like the cypress vine, like one of its parents. It is not soft and fluffy. It's just very fern-like in its appearance. So it just gives you this really nice texture. But the real story is about these deep crimson red trumpet-shaped blooms that will start when it's just a couple of feet tall. So starts in spring and goes all the way through to the hard frost. So you can imagine, trumpet-shaped and red flowers. Yeah, obviously, the hummingbirds go bananas over it. It's stunning. I love that it's well-behaved. I love that it's a vine that's, kind of unusual, like not a ton of people know it. It isn't Morning Glory, and it looks markedly different than Morning Glory. And it's also not trumpet vine. It's not campsis. And everywhere I look online, people talk about, oh, hummingbird plant, campsis. Let me tell you, campsis might be a native, but it is real aggressive. And once you have campsis, you will never be rid of campsis. Trumpet vine is extremely aggressive. So I would recommend against planting that and try Cardinal Climber. It's really lovely. And my little seed starter down there, Carol, have you ever grown Cardinal Climber?
I have not. I don't have a lot of vines, and it's just like a blind spot for me. So I should try this one though. I'm afraid because like some of them are so aggressive. Like where is it going to go? What's it going to do?
Right. Is it going to reseed? Is it going to, yeah, no, none of those are a concern. It is hardy to zone 10, B, 11. So yeah, not a chance. And you know what, that is going to come back for us here in Connecticut and in most of the North America. All right. And then the second one that I wanted to give Danielle for an out of the ordinary hummingbird plant is, this is not an out of the ordinary plant, but I think it's out of the ordinary to think about it for a hummingbird. And that is Earlybird Red White columbine. So, and that's Aquilegia and a whole bunch of letters. You don't have to worry about it. Just know Earlybird Red and White columbine. And I started thinking about, wow, like columbine for hummingbirds. But of course, hummingbirds in a lot of areas of the country show up early, and there's not a whole lot for them generally to eat at that time. There is not a lot of nectar producing plants. So this is an extremely early series of columbines that sometimes will start blooming in some areas of the country as early as March. So you're providing that. And obviously, early bird, yes, it wakes up early. But I also thought, oh, that's so cool, because immediately this series was developed in order to provide nectar for the hummingbird. So I think that it's pretty awesome that they had that in mind, the plant breeders, when they developed this series of columbines. I picked red and white because obviously the red coloring tends to attract hummingbirds a little bit more. But honestly, hummingbirds will go to anything. It's more the shape of the plant and the concentration of the nectar within it. But I went with red and white. There's also a purple version as well, if that's more your cup of tea. But anyway, this particular one is has rose red flowers. They're kind of those spurred tubes that are clustered together. So if you can kind of picture, a tube with like a little spur on the end of it. It has white center, so then that rosy red on the outside, so a cool bi-color going on. And holy cow, so well behaved. 18 inches tall by 18 inches wide. So just a lovely front of the border, early in spring, prolific bloomer. So starting in March, perhaps April, and going for a good month or so. So you're really providing a ton of sustenance for those hummingbirds. It likes shade to partial shade, moist, well-drained soil, and zones 3B to 9. So that's a pretty large swath too, because Danielle, I didn't know what zone you were in, so I wasn't exactly sure what kind of plant to recommend for you, but I thought both of those, an annual option that's a vine and a really cool perennial that honestly, I've thought about columbines before, but not really as hummingbird attracting plants. So those were my two, and let me know if you grow them, Danielle. Carol, I remember back in the day, in TV shows, they'd be like, let's go into the mailbag. So let's go into the virtual mailbag. Who's next with a letter to us?
Okay, the next one I have is Linda, who said, I purchased a Reminiscent Pink rose. That's one that comes from Proven Winners. That's hardy from zones 4 to 9. In spring, I planted it in a container and it did well over the summer. And for winter, I put it in a plastic pot. I put a hole in a bubble wrap bag, inserted the pot into the bag, and stuffed it all into another plastic pot to insulate the roots in zone 6B, which is she's near St. Louis.
Okay.
Both pots have drainage holes, of course. Do you think this will insulate the roots well enough? And if not, what would you suggest? So the first thing I'm going to suggest is that Fine Gardening has a wonderful collection of container gardening articles organized on our website in a comprehensive project guide. So my first recommendation is check out the winter section of that, and I will drop a link into the show notes. But the guide contains, it has an article from Muffin Evander from issue 119, and she gives us a good rule of thumb. She says that for winter containers, these are containers that are going to stay outside in your zone over the winter. You want plants that are two zones hardier than yours, right? So I think for Linda in Missouri in 6B, this rose, which is hardy from zones 4 to 9, is going to be just fine. And, I honestly, that bubble wrap is not doing anything. I have a bit of a background in construction. The R value of bubble wrap is less than 1. And especially if it gets wet, heat will go right through it. Cold will go right through it. Heat moves from warm to cold and more to less. It's really not going to help. What will help, and if you are pushing your zone, is if you can sink that pot into the soil, because the soil it's like a heat sink. It really just stays the same temperature year round. The top of it's going to freeze, but that is going to do a whole lot more to keep your plant from freezing and thawing, and the stress of being out of the ground will be greatly lessened if you can find a way to temporarily get it into the ground. If you don't have a place to do that, maybe you can put it into a mulch pile, bury it up to the soil level in mulch. That'll do the same thing. If you can't do that, maybe wrap it in, a moving blanket, put it in an unheated garage while it's dormant. That might help too. But I don't know. The bubble wrap seems like a lot of work, and it's probably not going to help much, but there really are things you can do. And, the other thing people do is just heel it into an empty garden spot. Just pull it out of the container, drop it into the ground in the spring, take it back up, put it in the container. You're good to go again. But I would say definitely check out the Container Gardening Project Guide. It's really good. If you are a container gardener, there are a whole lot more tips in there that are, that'll help you do better containers and get great ideas for next year.
Absolutely. I love that you were able to get some of your construction background even into this answer. I mean, that was amazing. I'll also say that, take advantage of your leaves you're in St. Louis, you're in an area where there's a lot of deciduous trees. So in the past, when I've had something that's, is in a pot, might be borderline hardy, I shove that puppy right up against my foundation and I just pile on the leaves, because I might not necessarily have a whole ton of mulch on standby, but man, we get a ton of leaves. So you can just bury it. And it's interesting because, you can stick your hand in there in the winter. And it is actually warmer in that, leaf cave that you've created. That's not ideal. Carol's answers are much better, but if you're lazy like me and you forget at the final hour, just throw some leaves on them up against the foundation. And yeah, like you said, I mean, zone 4, you should be all set. You should be pretty good. All right, so we're going to get into some more science questions. Fire Escape Gardens wrote in and said, should people start planting Ilex glabra instead of boxwoods? And in a word, probably. And I just assumed that Fire Escape Gardens was talking about boxwood blight, which we are all too familiar with here in Connecticut. It's been about a decade, I believe. It was like 2012, 2013 that we had a very large nursery here in Connecticut lose over 100,000 boxwood plants that were containerized and being grown for, garden centers around the country. And all of a sudden there was a massive die-off. And, research has shown that this blight has made its way from Europe over here. And Carol, you travel around the country now. I do too, taking photos for fine gardening. And I don't think that I've been to a single location in the last few years where I haven't noticed at least one boxwood or so at a garden, a botanic garden that has really started to succumb to this boxwood blight. I think it's also important to know about boxwood blight that there's 2 other host plants for this disease. And one of them is sweetbox, sarcocoa, which you'll see a lot of people recommending that as a replacement for boxwood. Don't do that, folks. Sweetbox actually also is also susceptible to the boxwood blight. So you're not doing yourself any favors there. You're going to end up with the same problem on the same plant. And then the other one, which I don't recommend planting, but a lot of people have, is Pachysandra. These are all part of the same family. Buxus and sweetbox and Pachysandra are all part of the same family. They're all susceptible. They're all host plants for boxwood blight. So stay away from all of those. I do want to mention that, Fire Escape Gardens mentioned Ilex glabra, which is a partially deciduous, it's semi-deciduous option. So I don't know if that's really a good 1-for-1 substitute for boxwoods. I think maybe like Ilex crenata, which is Japanese holly, would be better. Inkberry is Ilex glabra, and that is semi-deciduous depending on where you live in the country. But, a better 1-for-1 choice would be any of the Ilex crenatas, which really have many of them, boxwood look to them and are not susceptible to boxwood blight. But I think, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, plant breeders are on top of this, of course, and they're starting to develop resistant varieties of boxwood because, some people, there's just no substitute for that look. And also I will say boxwoods are extremely tough in all other aspects of their life. They are susceptible to this one disease, but look for this it's called New Gen, trademark, Boxwood series, which are zones 5 to 8. There's a couple of different varieties that have been tested now for upwards of 4 years. One is called Independence, and that's Buxus SB 108. And the other one is Freedom, which is Buxus SB 300. This whole New Gen series, they have put it to the test. And it's pretty cool to see some of these, trials that they have done where they've got rows of this New Gen series next to boxwoods that they purposely planted infected boxwood blight stock right next to it and just let it roll to see what would happen. And so far, several years in now, these are showing resistance to the boxwood blight, which is awesome. But I think it's worth considering, other things too. We already mentioned, Ilex crenata, which is Japanese holly. You can go for the native Yupon hollies, which is Ilex. I'm going to screw this up. Vomitoria. It sounds terrible.
That's really what it is, though, right?
It is. It really is. So we'll stick with native Yupon holly, which is a great one. Hey, viburnums. There are so many great viburnums out there, many native options, many evergreen options. They bloom. Boxwoods don't bloom. Well, I mean, they do, but you don't really notice. I mean, viburnums are a great ecological plant for wildlife too, because they bloom, they have a great berry set, great fall color. So maybe viburnums are the way to go. You can also do leucothoe and even arborvitaes. There's varieties of dwarf arborvitaes that are going to give you the same look, shape, and effect as a boxwood. So I think that these are all good alternative options, good for diversification. I understand if you're beholden to boxwoods, there are new varieties now that are showing resistance, but I think it's worthy fire escape gardens of branching out and maybe starting to plant other species as opposed to the monoculture of boxwoods. All right, Carol, what's next on your mailbag list?
So I have a question that we actually got this question from a few different people, and they have asked for butterfly hosts that are not milkweed. And I get it. Like we hear day and night, oh, plant more milkweed. It's good for the monarchs. So there are other kinds of butterflies and moths, right? So, and there are a ton of great garden plants that you can plant that will be hosts for caterpillars. And it's good not only for the butterflies, but also for the birds that feed caterpillars to their babies. So I would say number one, the top one that I saw that supports Lepidoptera species is oak. That's just plain old Quercus species and cultivars. And oak species in the United States support 468 species of butterflies and moths, which is considerable. And, I think the other thing to think about is that with a tree, the volume of habitat that you are creating is enormous. You've got a whole world for the chickadees to go hunting and the baby caterpillars to grow up. And we're gardeners, we're on the ground, we're looking at the ground all the time. Look up and think, what could I plant that would fill that space up there that would be good for the wildlife? And oak trees are one of those keystone species, and that's one of the reasons. Another good one that's just a fun plant to have in your garden is pussy willow. That's the native Salix discolor, which is found throughout the northern states in Canada. And that is a host for several butterfly species. And native willows in general are host to many different moths and butterflies. So no matter where you live in North America, you can probably find a native willow that'll support some Lepidopterae. Goldenrod solidago is great. 82 species from what I have found are supported by solidago. And so if you're growing these things and you have holes in the leaves, that's great. That's the desired result. Common blue violet, several species of fritillary depend completely on violets for their caterpillars as a food source for their caterpillars. So that's a great reason to let your lawn go in no mow May. And also not to get so upset about that. I don't understand how people get so upset about the violets in their lawn. It's like bonus garden, right?
Oh my gosh, I know. And it's so much prettier than turf grass is. I mean, come on. Kentucky bluegrass has nothing on a violet. Nothing.
Yes. Yeah. So just think of those pretty little blue violets as not only biodiversity, but caterpillar food. Golden Alexanders, that's a fun one that people often recommend. Zizia aurea, that's a host for black swallowtails, which also lay their eggs on parsley and dill. And there's always somebody in our local gardeners group every year to, what is happening to my dill? And what is this terrifying looking insect on it?
Don't squish it.
I think they're cute. But anyway, that is the black swallowtail larvae, and they just will eat the heck out of your parsley and dill. And I say plant it for them and buy your dill from the store.
I love it. That's awesome.
A couple more: New Jersey tea, Ceanothus americanus. That's host to multiple butterfly and moth species. It also attracts small pollinators that the hummingbirds like to catch and feed to their babies. Hops, Humulus lupulus, supports multiple species, including the red admiral and the eastern comma, and evening primrose, which is, more of your western states. You'll have those Oenothera species, and that supports at least 22 moth and butterfly species. And don't forget your native grasses like big blue stem. That is also a larval host for many species. So the Xerces Society has regional plant lists that are downloadable, and I will drop a link to those in the show notes, and you can get ideas for wherever region that you're in. But just rest assured, there are tons and tons of things that are not milkweed that are great for butterflies.
Yeah, and it sounds like in a lot of native options that might already be growing in your area or around your garden or in your lawn. So it's good to kind of have an eye on those. So maybe don't be so crazy about weeding, quote unquote, out every little thing that seems out of place, because it might be really important to the ecosystem, not just butterflies alone. All right, so let's see. Robin, my next one is from Robin the Gardener, and she asked, what are your favorite neat and tidy front yard plants? Plants that look decent in all seasons. That's what we all want, right? We all want plants that stay a nice, well-behaved side, that we don't have to prune constantly, that look good year round. Well, that's tough. I mean, especially when you go out of, the range of, okay, short, squat, evergreen conifer, because there is this whole section of time, winter, i.e. winter, that it's kind of hard. What do you call look good at that point? I like a seed head here and there, but maybe that's not Robin's cup of tea. But I'll offer a few things. What I did for this question is I went out, I plopped myself on my front steps, I looked up at my front yard garden, my front foundation planting, if you will, and I picked out my two favorites and then a list of some perennials that I thought were worthy too. So the first one I'm going to say is just a dwarf oakleaf hydrangea. All right. Oakleaf hydrangeas, which are hydrangea quercifolia. The one I happened to pull out of the grab bag was the first one I saw in my front yard, and that's Gatsby Gal, which is the cultivar name is Bren Hill. It's zones 5 to 9. You can't go wrong with an oakleaf hydrangea, okay? It's a shrub that performs in every season, truly performs in every season. So, a dwarf, any of these dwarf oakleaf hydrangeas can be anywhere from 2 to 3 feet tall and wide to 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. And regular oakleaf hydrangea can go upwards 10 to 12 feet. So stick with the dwarf ones. I love this Gatsby Gal. It's got large, really cool oak leaf looking foliage that is huge leaves, the size of my head, that have these really cool rough texture to them, which is just divine. Then, around this time of year, so we're talking, early to midsummer, you get these large panicle blooms that are white. They can be upwards of 12 inches. So that's pretty impressive. Like 1/5 of the whole total size of this shrub is taken up by a flower. And it gets absolutely covered in flowers. Those panicles of flowers that go all the way through summer, the white flowers, eventually they fade, but they don't fade to brown. They fade to this gorgeous mauve, kind of a dark pink, rusty pink showing, which is just as beautiful in my opinion. And then, man, fall color, it's so much, it's better than an oak tree. It goes yellow, it goes orange, it goes bright red, then burgundy. And then the leaves drop off. And I know everybody talks about exfoliating bark. It's so cool. And a lot of people are like, ew, it doesn't look cool. This is cool exfoliating bark on this plant. It is cinnamon colored. It almost looks like cinnamon sticks are peeling left and right off of this plant. And it's super attractive in winter. So I think a dwarf oakleaf hydrangea should be in every front yard garden across America. They're just amazing. And let's keep in mind too that hydrangea quercifolia is a native hydrangea as well. So My next one that just jumped out, and it's one that I've talked about on the podcast before, but it's Perry's Gold Norway spruce. I think, let's give a shout out to those dwarf conifers. I know they can be pricey. I know that they're an investment, but that is truly a 4-season plant that in a front garden, 1 or 2, really have a presence year round. So this is Picea abies, Perry's Gold. It's zones 3 to 9. So it covers a large swath of the North American continent. It's a dwarf conifer that I actually got from Caddy's Falls Nursery in Vermont, which I know is a favorite of yours as well, Carol, because it was up near where you used to live. I've had it for 10 plus years now. I looked back at my little journal, and it's done well. It's only about right now in my garden, maybe 2.5 feet tall and wide, maybe 3 on a good day. It's got this squatty appearance, kind of a little bit of a pyramid shape, but these long as long as you can get with 2 feet tall and wide, this kind of arching branches, kind of looks like a ballerina's tutu. You kind of get that layered effect to it. They're swooping, they're outstretched, but it's really in spring. This is a very dark green, luscious conifer, but in spring, it pushes new growth that is bright acid yellow. And I know a lot of conifers do that, right? They get this really colorful new growth, but Perry's Gold, so it started in spring. So it started March here. It is now, we are launching towards August, and it is still yellow. It still has those yellow tips. They haven't burned out. They don't burn out in the summer. And for me, it won't actually start to fade until September or so, which is exactly when I want it to look like a little normal, quote unquote, Christmas tree. It's perfect. It puts on its green cape for the fall and winter months. So yeah, I just love it. It's in full sun. It tolerates poor, lean, well-drained soil. So I don't do anything to it. I've given it no exceptional care other than getting it established, which is important for these conifers in the beginning. And it's just a stunner. And then you guys know, I'm not as big into the perennials, but I'm going to throw out some perennials that I think are worthy. They're not necessarily all evergreen, but they're worthy for the front yard garden. And that would be epimediums, which are going to give you that evergreen presence, low growing, colonizing type of ground cover. I'll talk about them more in another question down the road here. Ito peonies, because I think that they're just well behaved. They don't need staking. They put on a bloom show like no other. And if you ever get deliveries from the Amazon man, he'll be obsessed with your Ito peonies because they're beautiful. And the last one I'm going to say is anything in the Amsonia, the blue star family. Just a gorgeous plant, actually gets some of the most magnificent fall color from a perennial that you can ask for, and really, really interesting seed pods in winter. So again, my roundup of perennials is epimediums, Ito peonies, and Amsonias. All right, Carol, this, oh gosh, wow, we're running long on this one already. All right, rapid fire. Who do you have next for a question?
Okay, I think this one's pretty easy one.
Okay.
At G Nelms asked, when you deadhead flowers, should you replant the seeds or preserve them? And I think of deadheading and seed harvesting as 2 separate operations, and I'll explain why. So I think of deadheading as removing a flower as soon as it finishes blooming, but before it starts to develop seeds. And we do this for aesthetic reasons, because you don't want, the plant immediately looks better as soon as you cut those dead flowers off, but also for performance reasons, because in many cases, removing that spent flower before it puts energy into seeds is going to redirect energy into remaining buds that will then produce flowers more quickly than they would if it was trying to make seeds, which is quite energy intensive. So if my plan is to harvest viable seed, I'm going to leave those flowers on until they contain ripe seeds. And that is, it's not going to look as good, honestly, as if I was doing true deadheading. But each plant is different. I would say if you're deadheading, deadhead. If you are saving seeds, I would deadhead for a while, for the first part of the season. And this sort of naturally happens, as the season progresses and we get busy, or we're inside, or we're traveling, or whatever. Some things just naturally go to seed, and those ones you can go out and collect. And depending on how it disperses the seed, the plant disperses the seed, you may need to hang them upside down over a paper bag or something like that to collect the seed, because most of the seed heads have a natural way of dispersing them, and they will totally do that as soon as the seed is
whether
right.
you're ready for it or not, in your basement, exploding seed pods all over the place.
Exactly. But if you just keep an eye on it, that's a great way to get seeds for the next year. And if you're okay with random seedlings in sort of the same area that you had this growing in the current season, if you're okay with them coming back next year, by all means, let them just go to seed and do their own thing naturally. And you'll I love surprises, so that's sometimes fun. But Kielian DeWitt, our friend and author out in Montana, also has a method where she'll go through and cut down the tops of things as they've finished, and some of them have active seed heads and some of them don't. She just throws them into this area that's behind the shed, and in a few years she has new seedlings that have naturally generated back there, digs them up, puts them back into the garden. So that's something that you can do. It's a little less fuss and muss than tenderly gathering each little seed head and separating the chaff from the seed. But I'd say deadheading and seed harvesting can be the same thing, but just think of what it is your goal is before doing one of these two things.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, I think I naturally do that by accident. I would just throwing stuff into the compost pile at the end. I'm like, oh gosh, look at all those little verbena seedlings. Hooray. Transplant. All right, onward. I have a question from Erin Mickey. What do I plant under a huge maple tree? The roots, with a crying, angry emoji face. So clearly Erin is up against it right now. All right, I'm going to circle back to a couple questions before. My go-to is epimediums. I live in a very wooded area. My gardens all kind of go right up to the wooded edge. I have a lot of mature hemlock trees and mature maples and mature oaks. So I'm constantly trying to figure out what survives in that very, very root-bound, dry shade environment. And epimediums, which are sometimes called barren worts, are my go-to plant. So there are zones 4 to 9. I've seen a few different species that say to zone 3. So Erin, I don't know where you are, but there is still hope if you're in a very cold and a colder zone. They have stiff foliage, which is either heart-shaped or lance-shaped leaves. Certain varieties even have kind of yellow teeth all around the outside of the leaves that makes them look otherworldly or maybe a little deadly. They are not appetizing to deer and or bunnies, and that is just or rodents of any kind because of that stiff kind of indigestion-inducing foliage, I believe. In late winter to early spring, all these little wires kind of float above the foliage and get covered with these clouds of star-like flowers. They're absolutely beautiful. The colors, any color you can think of, white, pink, red, yellow, everything, purple, any color you like. Epimediums come in that flavor. I like the cultivar Stoplights a lot. I'm not a big red fan. I don't have a lot of red in my garden, but because epimediums flower so early, sometimes with my primroses and epimediums, I'm like, let's push the envelope. Let me get a little orange and red into the mix. And Stoplights I'm going to put a picture of it up on our show notes at finegardening.com. It is a red-yellow bicolor epimedium, so it literally does look like a stoplight with the green foliage. Get it? And it's really, really cool. I love it. It's just beautiful. All right. This is going to be a shocker for longtime listeners, but the second plant I'm going to recommend for underneath a huge mature maple tree is hellebores. I have a love-hate relationship with hellebores. I think classically, I thought that they were kind of overrated because they're zones 4 to 9 and they bloom in winter. Regardless of where you are, they bloom in winter. And I live in New England, and these plants, historically, for many of the older cultivars, their blossoms were hidden underneath the foliage and face down. There is no way when it is 0 degrees outside that I'm going to lay on my belly so I can look to see if my hellebores are blooming. Like, that is not going to happen. But plant breeders, they are a smart bunch. And over probably the last couple of decades, they have started to breed these hellebores that have outward facing blooms that do hover above the foliage. And they're truly, truly stunning. I mean, there are some cultivars that are just chef's kiss. Mwah. Wonderful. My favorite is Spanish Flare, which is a very light pale yellow, again, early in the season, and it has a red center to it or a burgundy center to it. So absolutely beautiful. That individual flower on the hellebore is 3 inches across. I mean, they're big. We're not talking about wussy flowers here. But hellebores are dry shade loving. They have these huge kind of lovely palmate green leaves that are just attractive, evergreen year round. You do have to do some cleanup, much like the epimediums, after they flower, after they push new growth. The old growth is kind of these bedraggled leaves that you have to go around and kind of trim up a little bit. That's really the only maintenance they need, though. They don't need consistent water. They don't need constant fertilization. They don't need good soils. They thrive in root-bound competition areas. So I would say between the both of those, and if you planted epimediums with hellebores, threw in a couple painted ferns, because those do well too, ethereums, you have yourself a garden right underneath that maple tree, and you'll be sending us happy face emojis instead of cryy face emojis. Good luck, Aaron. Okay, Carol, I feel like we're pushing maximum capacity here for the length of this episode, but we're going to give Peter a vacation day. How does that sound?
He'll love that.
He's probably happy about that. And we're going to take one more question. And this question came in via email from Jody. And how about we'll both answer this one. What are you guys doing in your gardens right now? And she was talking more about garden tasks and what we are doing in our gardens right now. So I'm going to punt it over to you, Carol, while I think about my answer.
Okay. All right. So we are in the height of summer now, which also happens to be the height of our travel season. I have 2 back-to-back trips this month, and we're taping a little ahead of time for that reason. But this is when I am in the panic because the crabgrass has started to emerge, and I am weeding and mulching and trying to stay ahead of the crabgrass. So that's mainly any minute that I'm not working inside at my desk for fine gardening, I'm outside in my less than fine garden pulling crabgrass and putting down mulch. I got super lucky this year. Our neighbor took down 8 trees and had the branches are all ground up into arborist chips that my neighbor cannot use, and I can. So, yeah. So I am using those as my mulch, and I have actually made a few new beds this year, and that's why I'm kind of behind with the beds that were already there. But that's something that I would like to have had finished by July 4th, because really that's when the weeds really start to take over. The other thing I'm doing is staking tomatoes, tying up vegetables. The vegetable garden is a whole other project. And the other thing that I want to encourage everybody to do is get out there and take pictures. All right, things are starting to happen. Your goals are being accomplished. Plants that you tried, last year are probably actually starting to look good this year. And I always forget to take pictures unless it's for the podcast or, for work. But really, this is the time of year to start going out there and documenting it, because do you think you're going to remember in the middle of winter when you're planning for next year? You get in the middle of winter and it's all a blur. So If you have a good roll of photos in your phone, that's what you should, that's what you can look back on and remember, like, what you're going to do the next year, make plans. Oh, and also check out All Access regional reports, because they have wonderful ideas what you can be doing right now, really trying to keep that content fresh, up to date. You can, if you're an All Access member, you can follow more than one region. I follow the Mid-Atlantic, I follow the Northeast, I follow the Southeast. What the heck? They have good ideas. But that's another thing to be doing, is like check in on the all access regional reports, because they give you sort of up to the minute what can you be thinking about, what can you be doing right now.
Absolutely. And you guys can find that if you go to finegardening.com, and up on the navigation bar at the top, you just click on the My Region tab. It's actually, I think it's right next to the podcast tab. So we couldn't make it any easier for you. And yeah, we've got amazing gardening experts from around North America who man a particular region, and they're telling you up to date what's going on. I was just I was perusing the Northern California or the Pacific Northwest, I forget which at this point, and they were doing pest patrol, which is something that I am doing in my garden right now, the vegetable garden in particular. I am on pest patrol, making sure that I'm staying on top of the cucumber beetles, which is the bane of my existence. So I'm pest patrolling right now is what I'm doing in my garden. Primarily the vegetable garden, honestly. And the other thing that I'm doing, it's August, it's too hot. I'm not doing a whole ton of maintenance. My mulch is down, my plants are planted. I've made myself a promise the last few years that I will not plant a single thing after June 30th, because in the past, it's not the case this year, but we just aren't getting consistent enough rain. We aren't getting consistent enough moisture. I'm also on a well, so it makes it very challenging to keep up with the watering on the garden. And I just don't want to, be watering that much. So stopped planting. August for me is the edit list. I'm going around the garden and I'm looking at things going, that has just gotten too big for that particular spot. So for instance, I have a clump of bearded iris that is it should have probably been divided 3 years ago. And I mean, it's to the point now where it's way too big for the area that it's in. It's starting to decline. How irises kind of choke themselves out. So it's kind of an eyesore, and I've got to do that. So that went on to the edit list, that in fall, when things cool down a bit more and transplanting's possible, I'm going to tackle those bearded iris. Also, plants that I just don't like anymore, or just really aren't serving their purpose in the spot, that need to be removed. I'm not going to do that now. Obviously, it's hot and I want to be able to pass that plant on to somebody who actually likes it. But I'm over my Shasta daisy phase. I'm just not a daisy person. I figured that out. It took me, 15 years, but I'm just not a daisy person. And underneath my red bud, my Cercis canadensis, it's gotten quite large. So it's not an ideal condition for this clump of Shasta daisies anymore. They're spindly, they're a little leggy. I need something variegated instead in that area. So I took a picture, I kind of plopped it into Photoshop. I'm subbing in and out things, and I think I'm going to replant that area with Bomeria, there we go. Nichirin, which is a variegated, cool false nettle. So I've made a list, that one on the list too. I'm going to be doing that. And then sadly, I'm noticing things that I just have to say goodbye to. I've had a witch hazel in the corner of my garden for, many years. It was one of the first things that I planted when I moved in, but we've had some serious gypsy moth invasions the last several years. And the witch hazel has just fallen victim to it year after year. And it's just not coming back. It's, out of, a 5-foot plant, it's looking like it's got one branch that's still alive at this point. So I babied it. I tried. I think it's bound for removal in the fall and a replacement with something fun. So basically I'm making notes because it's too bloody hot outside to do anything else. Oh my gosh, Carol. I mean, great answers, great questions all the way around. I would call that a successful, if not long episode, but if we didn't get to your question, don't worry. We'll get there eventually, right?
We will do this again. It is so much fun to hear from our readers. Sometimes it feels like I'm talking into a tin can and you're on the other end and no one else is listening, but yeah, they're listening and they have some great questions. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, keep them coming, folks.
Definitely. Again, reach out to us on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Fine Gardening. And you can also drop us an email. Don't forget about that. And visit the show notes because we've got all sorts of information from the links and sources that we mentioned today, as well as photos. So, hey, everybody, stay cool out there.